Welcome to KnotWork Storytelling. This is the show where we untangle our myths and reweave our stories, one age-old tale at a time. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Gowdy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, a coach for writers and creative entrepreneurs, and the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you'd become a paid subscriber on Substack. In my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, you'll receive bonus content related to the stories on the show and deep dives into how mythology and folklore can help heal the individual and the collective in the present moment and beyond. There's a link in the show notes to follow Myth is Medicine on Substack, or visit mythismedicine.substack.com. Season 5, Episode 15, Weaving Through Our Bones, Meeting the Cailleach with Sionnáin. Our guest Sionnáin is a singer, songwriter, and musician from the west of Ireland. Her path has guided her into gathering both traditional and channeled songs from the landscape of Éire. She lives and breathes the sounds of the land, offering them up as prayers, woven with raw edges, soundscapes, and the great depths of the ancient places that shape her journey. You can find her over on Instagram at Shannon Soul Sounds. At the end of our conversation, she'll tell you more about her new immersive online program that's coming up in November of 2024. Now, this song and conversation with this beautiful, beautiful Irish musician opens up the Samhain portal here on KnotWork Storytelling. We are, of course, releasing this right around October 31st, that holiday we know worldwide as Halloween. Now, Instagram is an algorithmic type of place. So I know that your IG is not my IG, but there's a very, very good chance that you've seen one of the many, many videos out there informing you about how Ireland is, in fact, the birthplace of Halloween. Now, this particular episode takes us in a very different direction. We explore the power of the Cailleach, the wise old woman goddess who many refer to as the sacred hag. We explore the power of the land and community customs, as well as the healing of collective pain and grief on the island of Ireland and beyond. We don't get into the lore of how Samhain became Halloween, or the counter-arguments that the relationship is all just a modern conflation. But sure, if you're interested, it's just a quick Google search away. The ancient ancestors who would have celebrated Samhain, the final harvest before the long, dark winter truly set in, would have celebrated it at the midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And of course, that's a little bit different every year. This year, it's on November 7th here in the Northern Hemisphere. As many of my friends and teachers describe it, Samhain is really more of a season than a single day. And it's surely the time when the veils are thin, when the ancestors and our beloved dead can reach us, if not because they can read the calendar, but because in the gathering cold and gathering darkness, we're finally quieting down and slowing down long enough for them to reach us. As you'll hear in this special conversation with Sionnáin, so much of the magic that we seek is available to us when we're able to do the simple but oh so difficult and oh so sacred work of opening ourselves to land, to spirit, to the elements of the unseen but ever-present realms. Irish mythology and lore teaches us that the altar, the other world, is always accessible. Sionnáin is here with us to continue our Myth Workers and Culture Makers series. Before we dive into a conversation about how she brings such mythic wisdom to life, let her drum and voice call you into the other world.
The Cailleach, the wise one, come to us in your song. Oh, the Cailleach, she's the wise one, and she's weaving through our bones. She's weaving through the stones. She created the winds. She wishes through the sea. She stands in the mountain looking over you and me. Oh yeah, the Cailleach, the wise one. She's seen it all before. She's softness and she's strength. She's darkness and she's light. She's weathered and she's old and she's grieving through her pores. And yeah, she's angry. She's ruthless. She'll do what she has to. The Cailleach, the wise one, weaving through our bones.
Thank you. What a gift your voice, your song is for all of us. Thank you for bringing us through the sound portal with those words. Those
Well, Jack, you're welcome. Yeah, it's an honor to share that powerful song that was gifted to me. So thank you for listening.
Could you tell us a little bit about the experience of that song coming through you? Was it a moment of when and where?
Yeah, so I know the seed of it was actually born early Samhain when I was at the Papsavanu, where I spent some time this time last year. So beautiful there, and such an ancient sanctuary space. So I was birthing a journey, and yeah, a poem landed, which is often for me how on reflection I see that the seed of the song is gifted in poetry and gifted through place, and then from there the song is birthed. But yeah, the song then was channeled by the fire in the depths of Samhain last year when I was at home living on my ancestral homelands in West Clare by the ocean. So I had just come off a call with a beautiful group of women about the Queena, about grief, and about this work that we are so deeply journeying into. And then it just came forth, just in one go, as it often does. And thankfully I got to record it because I can kind of feel it now, when it's coming through, there's a bubbling and a knowing. So I just grabbed have this little recorder that I use. Yeah, I always know when these songs are gifted to me, and I suppose I'm not writing them, let's say, when I have to then sit down and learn them myself. Like, what was that? All right, okay. Yeah, so it's almost, there's kind of a rap element to it, there's a kind of, and even for me, like, I feel the songs work their medicine just as much on me as they do to those who I sing them to. So when I first started singing that, I could really feel the force of her, and how, like, rooted she is in the contrast of all that she brings forth in her medicine to us.
It's definitely a song that, to me, I just want to sing it, at least a dozen times. Maybe it's 108 times. That's just the sort of thing. It always feels too short. But of course, knowing that it's just that opening into again and again. And that, I think that's often a relationship many of us have with the Cailleach, is that sort of again and again and deepening. But before we dive, like, there's so much we're here to cover. But I would love to just sort of help orient our listeners who might be new to the Cailleach. I think some of us feel like we know her on our bones so fully. I'd love to just sort of start with, like, for you, who is the Cailleach, and how does she? I mean, obviously we know how she speaks through you, but who is she to you?
Such a vast question. I feel that song speaks into a lot of what she is and what she holds, and invites us to uphold as women, particularly, I feel, but also for men and for all beings. But yeah, I suppose for me, when I think of her, I think of Slieve na Ceallaigh, I think of places, I think of the Hag's Tooth, where I was last year, down in Carrintoohil. And yeah, I feel the edges of places. She really reminds me of those rugged edges of the landscape. And then from what I've heard from different people upon my path is that she is actually our origins of our creation stories here in Éire and in Alba in Scotland too. So she is very much so part and interwoven within how the land came to be, how all these hills and mounds were created through her. And so she is that grandmother essence. And I feel that those holy temples that we go to honor, like Slieve na Ceallaigh, which is in a modern way known as Lockroo, for what reason I'm not quite sure. But nevertheless, but Slieve is like hill or mountain, like Slieve. Na Ceallaigh is literally her hill, like the translation in Irish. So we have so much that I feel, as you say there, even if we're not in relationship consciously with her, anyone who's living and breathing and living on the land is, regardless, and particularly those I feel who live near mountains or live near hills or who have a deep affinity to climbing hills, and doing pilgrimages of that nature, which of course so many do. But yeah, the grandmother essence is, I feel, that deep union. And for me, in the last couple of years, I really journeyed into that knowing through her of like, she's not just strong and fierce, she's also soft and, nurturing. And yeah, I feel that for different reasons, of course, we found ourselves in a place where there was almost a kind of derogatory ways of speaking to the likes of the Cailleach, like she's the old hag, which I just feel when I, like, even as I say that, oh God, like it feels so just, yeah. And there's just so many ways that I suppose the divine feminine in its pure embodiment has been tried to have been warped and molded into something that doesn't actually quite fully, and you kind of can't fully grasp it, as we know as well. But yeah, there's a richness there that I feel we can all really learn a lot from.
Love the way you name. Certainly, there's that fierceness of the Cailleach. There's the anger that you name in the song, and then there's
Mm.
also the softness. Like right now, I'm wearing a sweater that my grandmother made, and in that way that we know that old women of our lives often gift us with that extremely beautiful tenderness. And that
Mm.
brings my mind to the ways in which our past conversations have really been a lot around grief and grieving. And you even mentioned just briefly before your experience of channeling in this song was right after sharing the kina with a group of women. So maybe we
Mm.
could kind of explore these ideas of grief and in the anglicized version, the keen, that's so core to your work and it seems like it's so tied to the Cailleach's magic.
Mm. Yeah. So, well, firstly, the Queena in Ireland is an ancient Irish lament.
Mm.
It's a tradition and a way of ritual of supporting someone who has passed on and is leaving this world to fully leave the world and for its spirit to cross over in a good way. And so we, as an Irish people, and this is, something that is very much so worldwide and honored in many traditions, but just staying with the Irish context, we would have had this very deep ritualistic way of doing wakes. And we still, as people would say, do death very well here in Ireland. And we honor and celebrate people in a particular way. So for grief, for me, I suppose it's important to contextualize first my own meeting with grief. And when I was young, I experienced quite a lot of grief just in my own living and way of being, because of my lifestyle and different experiences, I suppose, that I faced. But particularly my father passing when I was young was the first, I suppose, deep meeting with the other world and with the primal, innate sounds and expressions that move forth and come through and are almost like uncontrollable, I suppose, when you're really faced with the depths of loss and with someone crossing over to the other realm. And now, with my inner knowing and what I've been shown in, I suppose, only really the more recent years about our Queena tradition, it all really makes so much sense to me, like so much of who I am and how I move through life, the waters and my connection with the tears that flow with the songs and with channeling is all I feel woven with the Queena. And so the Queena is our ancient Irish lament tradition and ritual that we have practiced here on this land for, I would say, it's pre-Celtic, it's pre-Christian, it's ancient. And I feel like all native people in their own way, all original peoples, found a way to move through death with sound and with ritual. So in an Irish context, we had these Ban Quincha, the Mana Quincha, the Keening women, and there was often at least three of them that would go to the place of when someone had passed and they would perform the ritual. And what I love about that is that there was also the Bauer Khan, which he was the kind of more trickster, kind of playful character that would have also been present. And in Ireland, we had not just the grief and the Queena, but we also had wake games. So Sean O'Sullivan writes about that in a beautiful book that he published. And yeah, I suppose the whole idea, it says it in the name, was to stay awake, was the wake. So in your job, you have a job to do, you have to support this soul to cross over and to leave this world in a good way. And regardless of whether you were very fond of him or not, like the whole community came around and they gathered, and there was, yeah, often at least three women. And usually, the woman who was the kind of main Ban Quincha, the main Keening woman, was often an older woman. And then she would have kind of two younger women, I suppose, that, we might say now that she was supporting them to see and to experience what needed to happen in those spaces. So those rituals, they happened in quite a structured way, but then there were also some improvised elements. So you had three parts to that. You had the invocation of the spirit, which was the salutation, and that's what it was known as, where they would honor the name of that soul, that person, and then they would move from that into the Derg, which was where they spoke about the person with everyone present around. And then they moved into the Gall, which was the cry, which was the Queena, which the women would lead. And the idea with that, I suppose, was that it would amplify or be a catalyst, for those who were present to release and to allow that grief to flow through. And then I suppose within that tradition, it kind of, it didn't fully die out from what I gather. It did continue to be practiced in more rural places and definitely by kind of working class people. But when everything happened with the church and with the British Empire and all of that kind of converged, I suppose, and the tradition really did dwindle quite a lot. And of course, then we had the famine and Uchris Moore. I'm sure, when that was all happening, like there was just the combination of the tradition dwindling, and then together with the immensity and the amount of death and what the people were faced with, has meant that I suppose we've now been left with quite an accumulation of grief, which is held in the people, it's held in the land. And coming back to the grandmother and the essence of what she carries, like if we imagine our great great grandmothers who were alive here then, depending on of course what age we are, but that the wisdom and the grief like is passed down, I feel, through the matrilineal line, the matriarchs, through the mothers and through the grandmothers. So now, like, we find ourselves here at this point, or I do, as a woman who's living on this land, and there's a reawakening of this cuina. There's a remembrance of this part of our lineage and our tradition, and there's a seeing of, oh, like this was, we were silenced as a people ultimately, and like one of our most innate primal ways of expressing is through the voice and through sound, and that was really ruptured for us. And so now we're here and we're remembering, we're reweaving the threads, and I feel that this is why there is so many more now turning to and being called to the Queen, are being called to tend to grief in different ways and bringing in different traditions and ways of moving through that. So yeah, it's a powerful time to be called into that, especially with what's happening across the world, but particularly what's happening in the Middle East and in Gaza. And I feel for us as an Irish people here, what before maybe we were just like brushing to the side and able to sweep under the carpet, it's like it's all being churned up now for us to really look at it, and we can really see there's a resonance, and there's a, our hearts are being broken wide open to what we're witnessing over there, and there's so much sadness and through that our own sovereignty and our own seeing that we are still on that pathway to being sovereign.
Oh, thank you for taking us through so much of the tradition of the Kina, and just from where you began with just giving us the sense of where it came from and the why, and how that the sense that it was a structured technology, for lack of a better word, I guess, in the sense of it was how grief was seen and held and processed and composted. And then the way you really name, like, and then there was that great rupture, the great rupture of the great hunger, of all of the ways in which, the church became so much more draconian and powerful after Angkor Timur. And when so much of the population had been lost. And what I really heard in that part of what you were saying too is that sense of like, yes, there was this beautiful ancient way of meeting grief and allowing it to pass through. And then when there became a point when it became just like trying to hold back a tsunami where you just no longer could. And it went beyond even the powers of the community, and perhaps even for a time, the powers of the Cailleach. And then as you really start to help us name and be with this moment, and certainly, the Irish people have done so much for the entire world in terms of being the great belly that's feeling what is going on in the world right now, for me being an American across the ocean, knowing that, really looking to friends in Ireland, so many Irish people who are just doing that work of saying, "Can you see it? Can you feel it? This is what's happening to the Palestinian people right now," has been such a gift and such difficult core work, I know. And also I think of my sense of so many that I've spoken to, that it's just it must be done. In that same way that I almost feel like perhaps the Bankinsha would go and show up and say, but this work must be done. It's hard, but this work must be done. And that sense of, yeah, watching the tradition be revived in the sense of, yes, coming back to using our voices in circles, and also using it in this modern sense of like on Instagram and in other spaces. Yeah, thank you for just kind of drawing us through that. It feels like thousands of years of the ways a tradition has grown and shifted and changed, and that we could still meet it, hopefully, and honor it for all that it was and all that it's rooted into. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, on that, like I feel so important to acknowledge a woman of this land, Mary McLaughlin, who has done an immense amount of work, research, particularly academic work, much of which you can access online for those listening who may feel to dive deeper into this well of wisdom, because there actually is quite a lot of wisdom there that was held to in our songs and in our languages. I say languages because, of course, there's different dialects all around Ireland, which just brings us a particular nuance and particular songs and poetry that would have really sustained those people and sprung up from the lands there. And yeah, I feel like for us, although maybe for the most part the women were not keening as much on that tradition, wasn't practiced as frequently, we continued with our songs, and somehow it never fully died. And you can feel that like in the places and in the land. And although, as I said, there can be in particular places like a real strong sense of accumulation of grief and a density that is really hard to feel, and especially when you're simultaneously opening up and remembering and attuning to all of what it means to be, I can only speak from a woman's body, but like what it means to be a woman. And like for me, when I'm driving through the land, and sometimes you're feeling the contrast. And again, that brings me back really to the Cailleach, though, because she, like all grandmothers I feel who have lived a very like deep journey, and they're almost like that song says, she's weathered, like, and I'd say a lot of Irish people would identify with that, particularly people who live on the West Coast. But like when you've lived, that richness and the colorfulness of life, and you've kind of been through the storms and all of these experiences, then really, I suppose, you just learn how to open more and more to that. And I feel that in a way our people have really been able to do that in a beautiful way through song and through music, and channeling the strength through that. And as well, there's also been, just because of everything that happened, it's almost, and as I speak to people and work with people, it's like it can feel just the immensity of it, that it's like a mountain. How, like, where would I even get up that mountain, and how would I, what would I bring with me? And then because there's this sense of not maybe having a map, or like no one's passing you down a book saying, and although we can pray to and ask for guidance from our ancestors and our grandmothers, for many of us, from my journey anyway, like I never knew any of my grandparents, and they were passed on when I was born. Yeah, so my journey has been through that remembrance. It's been really deeply through communing with the ancestors through spirit, and also through the waters, particularly, and really feeling the grandmother's presence and the cleansing and the remembrance through the Ishka, through the water, and through our language and landscape. So I think when I look to and I reflect myself on my own ancestors, and I feel into like what they were facing, and during the time of on Tuckras More, sure, they were just trying to survive. Like they didn't have time to keen or greet, like they were just like chop wood, carry water was their main focus.
And all of life was like the keen, right? At that
Yeah.
point, like you don't need to ritualize something that actually is your lived reality,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something I'm hearing on what you're saying, which just seems like I feel I want to underline, as you're speaking about the power of being open to the guidance. Of course, the unspoken but clearly stated thing is that otherwise we do walk around immensely closed, because then a hill is just a hill, a mountain is just a mountain, a stone is just a stone. Let's blast through them and put in a dual carriageway. And wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to make our way from Sligo to Galway in less than 2 hours, or whatever it may be? When I was there last week, I was so aware of that. I could feel the newness of the road in certain ways. And it felt both, I was grateful for it. And I also knew that there was a sense of loss, which I feel like is sort of that Cailleach message that says, right, what was destroyed in order to make this moment of convenience and ease and being able to get from here to there, and to make it possible to see other sacred spaces. But that sense of the being closed up doesn't feel like an option in our modern society, but this aspect of opening and receiving is such a conscious choice to be made over and over again. And that just feels like that's so embodied in everything that you do, is that conscious choice to say it again. What's it like to call in a new song and to use my voice in this new way, and invite others to do it with you?
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I just have such a visual hearing you, and being on the roads, and like I of all places, I really just feel like if there's such a strong, like I was speaking to earlier, this density that's there.
Mhm.
There's babies. like buried there that we, are only really gathering the immensity of all of that and what happened here with the Magdalen laundries. And, there's been a lot of reparation and work and compassion and forgiveness in that. But there is such, a density in that place. And as I was driving towards there, and I have this vision for a really beautiful grief ritual there, like a big queen with a lot of women to happen there one day, because I feel it's really needed. And, a dear friend, Dee Mulrooney, has done so much work around this as Growler, and so too as Laura Murphy, and many more women of this land who are really a voice for the women who have moved through that. And, from my perspective, like my mother, I was born in 1990. My mother left here and went to England to give birth to me around that time because of the aftermath of, even though that wasn't necessarily happening then, though I feel my mother and her, the shame that was directed towards her for just being with the child without being married was immense even then, and that's not that long ago, so just to, I suppose, contextualize how, a lot of these we mightn't know consciously as much, but like until it's unearthed and brought to the surface, we don't fully maybe see how, oh my goodness, like that's really impacted how, my relationship is with life, and how my mother was met, and how all of these things, how this trickles through the consciousness of our inner waters. But coming back to driving through the land, like I was on my way to Clare, and then I was thinking of like the different places that I've been to, and places in Clare, like particularly up around the Burren, down in Kerry, and up in Donegal, and you have these pockets of places that like have a really strong hold of these characters that are just like, they just carry something that is so strong in them. And one of my reflections around that is that those places were the kind of strongholds that really fiercely stuck their heels in the ground and said, no, we won't stop speaking our language, and we won't stop singing our songs or dancing. And and they really continued that thread. And it's, they continued to drink the waters from the wells, and they just knew that this is so precious here, and I'm going to protect it, and I'm going to do everything that I can. And, and this isn't to say that everybody else didn't, but there was something in those places. And these are the places that a lot of people, when they come here, they go to the Burren, these places, where John O'Donoghue wrote so much of that beautiful body of work that he has shared, John Moriarty down in Kerry. Yeah, I suppose as much and all as we do need to grieve and lament what we have lost and what we have endured as a people, it's about really feeling it, acknowledging it, and then doing our best to alchemize that and move into like a space of the gifts.
What you name in that, I feel like to call back to the beginning of our conversation, where the Cailleach offering both the sense of fierceness and anger, but also that sense of tenderness. And you sort of gave us that same contrast where there's parts of the land where the density and the shadow and the pain is still so intense. And for our listeners who may not be familiar with, Tuam in Galway was a space where I guess it was a convent, where many remains of many, many children were found not that many years ago. And that really sort of brought so much attention to everything that happened with the Magdalen laundries and all for unwed mothers in Ireland specifically, pain that families and children and women have gone through. But as you name that and then call us to the real nexus spaces of healing and of light, and the contrast between the two just seems to underline everything that's happening in this conversation, to both be with the immensity of the pain and the joy and possibility. And I just want to, honor and thank you for sharing your own birth story too, and what your mother would have gone through to say that even just a handful of decades ago, exile was so part of the story, even if only temporary. And that pain is, as a daughter of the diaspora myself, there's that sense of knowing that leaving the land that you speak of with such love and reverence was so often the story, and the returning back and the anchoring back in. So thank you so much for giving us that window into the vastness of the experience of this place. Go home.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it just, flowed forth. I suppose I never really shared that with very many people at all, let alone. But like I trust in the moments where the rightness flows, and that's very much so I feel how I am guided to move through life. And yeah, I remember hearing some years ago, we're only as sick as our secrets. And this is one of the direct outcomes of what we've moved through, just say in an Irish context, is that we've been encouraged to, like I was when I was younger, with some, like when I lived rurally, and like, my parents saying, now don't say anything to so and so about, don't don't tell her anything. you know and like that's kind of in a more light, playful way. But like now with the work I've done, and you look beneath that, there's a real, when you think of us as a people going around door to door, like now with Samhain beckoning, that was a big part of our tradition. And once we'd all the house sorted and the wood and the turf and everything, we'd go door to door and bring the songs and the stories. And sure, everyone knew everything about everything and everyone, because we were all one big village or family, and people mightn't have all liked each other. That's okay, but like, everything was shared, including the extra vegetables we had, and everything was, there was that just real kindness and generosity. And I do feel that we have really carried that forth. But yeah, I feel like now, we have a responsibility. So we have this ability now to respond where our ancestors may not have had, because they were in survival mode. And we now have so much more insight and imbas, this illuminated wisdom that is gifted to us, and that we too have inherited, as well as with the pain that we may have inherited and the trauma, and that we've also lived. We have also inherited many gifts and a lot of wisdom. And now we know that we have the opportunity to rewrite those stories, as the children of those generations. And I really lived that in my experience, in that I can remember, as I'm sitting here speaking to you about this, like I can recall times where I was absolutely wading around in grief. Like I was really, and I kind of didn't know how I was going to rise out of that, or what would come. And now, from the last couple of years in particular, being able to, I suppose, frame and name what I had been feeling all through my life in ways, this Queena, and this real strong connection to the waters and to the tears, and then being able to see that, but this is actually a role within a community like this. And many carry that role. And I would say now in this time, not just women either, but men too. And we're here to, I feel, to reimagine and to recreate that sense of the village and the community, albeit now it may be quite fragmented and it's global. Look at you and I here on this call, and we've never actually even met in the physical, but yet I feel that we have. And we're, I have a sense of the thread that you're carrying, and the beauty and the weaving that you're doing with this vision that you carry. And yeah, so I feel like we have this just very special ground that we're standing on now. We're reweaving the webs, and we're all carrying our own unique thread, and we're offering that in. And what we're creating is really, it's magic. It's the greatest form of magic that I've ever seen anyway.
Yes. Oh, you named it just so completely, of just this, the wonder of this moment, as well as the pain of this moment, and just the power of community that it is unique in Ireland. It is something that I go over there and have to like reckon with how much I don't know how to do it. Like that whole thing around, particularly of it's of a modernity, but it's certainly of Americanness, and maybe much of the Western world, is that individualism that we've gotten just rooted into ourselves, that has kind of become like a monocrop that has taken out so much of the richness and variedness of community. And even as you say, like it's all about supporting one another, even if you don't really like them. Like that, that was just something that in my recent travels in your world came home to me again and again. But I feel like you and I could talk for days and days, and I know there's other stories for you to tell us at other times. But for now, I feel like we're leaving at this gorgeous point because I know you're about to set off in with a new sort of community experience, a new adventure that really calls in specifically Cailleach, but also Bridget too. And I wonder if you want to talk with our listeners a little bit about that before we say farewell.
Yeah, so we will be embarking on a journey with the Cailleach. The journey is called The Descent. So the descent, dreaming with the Cailleach and rising with Bridget. So we're moving through three particular thresholds: Samhain, then into winter solstice, and onwards to Imbolc. So for me, those three thresholds are the foundations. Samhain is the beginning of the cycle of the wheel. And my own experience is that if we root and create a strong foundation through those three thresholds, then everything else just really spirals on from there. And we can then move out and into that, like, just beautiful femininity and the flow of allowing ourselves to be guided when we're in the other thresholds of the year, into spring equinox and the Altana and beyond, and move into that more playful sense. But we're really creating the foundations during that early time. So this is a journey connected to what I suppose we were just speaking to, where I'm weaving through what I have experienced and received from this land. So in the descent, at the beginning, we'll be journeying really into the ancestral layers and remembrance, and into grief and clearing the vessel. So really working on purification and the moving things out through the Quina, through song, through sound, and other embodiment practices, and then into winter solstice. So we're welcoming back the birth of the sun. So from that space of feeling lighter and having cleared the way, we can then dream more deeply with Lou, and with Bruna Boynia, with New Grange, and yeah, birth and witness, and see our visions. And then we're moving into Imbolc, which is, of course, Bridget's threshold. And yeah, Bridget is said to have been one of the first Ban Quinchas, healing women of this land. But of course, I would say the Cailleach definitely got there before her. But then when you look at all these archetypes, they one becomes the other, and the other, and it's all fitcha fucha interwoven. So into Imbolc, then we'll be tending to our seeds and our dawn, our destinies, our gifts and skills, and the poetry that we're here to share and to birth. So yeah, so it's a, like, almost, I think, 3 month journey into that space, and there will be a live transmission every 2 weeks, and then an embodiment practice that I send, which is a pre-recorded piece in between to support integration. So yeah, it's just what's called to move through me at this time, and it's a follow up of last year's journey, but this time it's that little bit longer, with the inside of what it felt could have been nourishing to have. As we learn, we always grow and deepen in this path. So, yeah, if anyone is listening that would love to join, you can reach out to me, and yeah, all the details will be shared, I'm sure, through the podcast anyway. But yeah, there are still a couple of spaces for those who feel called.
Yes, we will link to all of that so folks can really, yeah, just be in your wisdom and whatever growth that comes through in the community that you'll create in this beautiful work. So,
Mm.
oh, thank you so much, Sionnáin. Mila, Mila Buichas. So grateful. It feels right that we should ask the Cailleach song to sing us out again. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, sure. And just before I go, I just want to take a moment to really honor all of the wise and well ones, and all of the ancestors, even the unwell ones that have guided me on my path, and particularly the Cailleach, and Bridget, Danu, and yeah, just all of the people on this land who are igniting that spark of Imbas in themselves. and really tending to those threads. And yeah, particularly want to honour my friend down in Kerry, Geraldine Ahern, which I went through the deep journey with the Queen last year, and just all the Mana who were part of that rebirth. It feels that we shared. It was, yeah, it's just such a meaningful time for me. So I just want to honor that again.
Beautiful. It's so important to honor our
Thank you.
teachers in circles.
Yeah. And thank you, Marissa, for your weaving and listening to the Cailleach calling you into this. Yeah, Garth Mila Mahaga structure. Receiving the Cailleach's wisdom.
The Cailleach, the wise one, come to us in your song. Oh, the Cailleach, she's a wise one, and she's weaving through our bones. She's weaving through the stones. She created the winds, she wishes through the sea. She stands in the mountain looking over you and me. Oh yeah, the Cailleach, the wise one. She's seen it all before. She's softness and she's strength. She's darkness and she's light. She's weathered and she's old and she's grieving through her pores. And yeah, she's angry. She's ruthless. She'll do what she has to. The Cailleach, the wise one, grieving through our bones.
Thank you for tuning in to the KnotWork Storytelling Podcast. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of myth and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of myth and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories through this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a subscriber to my paid newsletter, Myth is Medicine. You'll find it on Substack, and that's where all my newest writing and occasional bonus podcasts can be found. You can learn more about my writing, my book, our online creative community, The Writer's Knot, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach over at marissagowdy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people.